This is the Capital Markets on Channels Television. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ididiong Iwang. Leading African investment company Here's Holding has acquired a 45% participating interest in Nigerian oil license OML 17 and related assets from the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, Total Nigeria Limited, and ENI. The transaction, which is one of the largest oil and gas financings in Africa in more than a decade, has a financing component of $1.1 billion, which is provided by a consortium of global and regional banks and investors. According to a statement sent to the NSE, the company says its subsidiary, TNOG Oil and Gas Limited, will be the sole operator of the assets. OML 17 has a current production capacity of 27,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day, an estimated 1.2 billion barrels of reserves of oil equivalent, as well as an additional 1 billion barrels of oil equivalent resources of further exploration potential. I will move to the markets now. The Nigerian equities market posted its first weekly gain for the new year as the all-share index advanced 2.63%, crossing the 41,000 psychological level. The equity cap also reached new highs during the week, rising to 21.530 trillion naira. Total turnover of volume, value, and deals were higher this week as investors exchanged 3.44 billion shares worth over 32 billion naira traded in 30,327 deals. Now, all the sectors we track closed the week positive, with insurance posting the strongest gain, followed by oil and gas, consumer goods, industrial goods, and the banking sectors. The demutualization process of the Nigerian Stock Exchange is now in full swing. Recently, the National Council of the NSE announced chief executives to head its operating and non-operating companies when the ongoing demutualization exercise is completed. The Stock Exchange took it a step further and inaugurated a 5-man claims review panel in preparation for the imminent demutualization. But with everything being put in place to set the ball rolling, what impact will this demutualization process have on the exchange and the Nigerian capital market at large? A professor of capital markets and the president of Capital Markets Academics of Nigeria, Professor Uche Waleke, joins us now to provide answers to these and more. Good evening, Professor. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Yeah, good evening, Edidio. It's my pleasure.
The Nigerian Stock Exchange is currently undergoing a process of demutualization. Now, let's just begin by understanding what this demutualization is all about.
Yeah, Edidio, once again, thanks. As the word suggests, if you look at the first two letters, D, it will suggest, to take off, to separate, as in the list. Or decouple. As you know, the Nigerian Stock Exchange was formed in 1960 as a company limited by guarantee, and as a mutual company, owned by members, the broker dealers. So the mutualization is a process of decoupling, okay, or separating, if you like, ownership rights from trading rights. And having a new legal structure, for the exchange, converting it from a mutual owned company, to now a company that is owned by shareholders. So that's precisely what it is. And traditionally, stock exchanges are formed as mutual entities. Over time, a number of them, tend to shed that off and then welcome new members, by way of, if you like, diluting control and accepting new members. Since the first one that took place in 1993 in Sweden by the Stockholm Stock Exchange, a number of them have followed suit. If you look at the World Federation of Exchanges, they have about 70 exchanges that make up the World Federation of Exchanges. About 2/3 of them, that's talking about 47 roughly, have demutualized. And in Africa, where you have 29 exchanges representing 38 countries, of course, 8 of them are members of the World Federation of Exchanges, and South Africa, led the way in 2005 when it demutualized. Nigeria is about to follow suit. So demutualization is a process, just as I talked about, that culminates. The final destination is in the listing of the exchange, on the exchange, if you like, self-listing by issuing an IPO. That is the final destination. But of course, some exchanges may demutualize and choose to remain private. So the first stage is what is about to happen now. Shares are going to be issued to the members. That's also why people say demutualization offers an opportunity to unlock value. So shares are going to be issued to members. That was why this exchange had to set up a claims review panel, to sort out any dispute that may arise, as a result of that process. So after that, the next stage, which is the final stage, would be listing of the exchange on the stock exchange to become so that the shares of that the exchange can be traded like any other company.
Prof, it's generally believed that the capital market in Nigeria, despite a number of achievements recorded in recent times, still lags behind peer countries. Now, how will the demutualization of the NSE facilitate the development of the capital market?
Yeah, the demutualization, no doubt, will raise the profile of the exchange. Will put the exchange in a strong position to attract other flows, because the competition really is with respect to other flows, and listing. So demutualization, the key driver of demutualization, I would say, is not even about to be able to raise capital to maybe finance modernization, finance technology demands, but it is in competition. So it will raise the profile of the exchange. It will put it in a stronger position to compete, compete globally, and will also enhance its ability to form alliances. So I expect that going forward, following demutualization, I expect to see more cross-border listings. Of course, just a few companies have this cross-border with respect to our market. Seplat, for example, is listed on the stock exchange and is also listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So we expect to see more of that when the process is completed. So studies have shown really that a demutualized stock exchange is in a better position than a non-demutualized one to enjoy some form of alliances and assistance from other exchanges. When the Amsterdam Stock Exchange demutualized, the exchange in Amsterdam and the one in Paris, as well as the one in Brussels, came together under a holding company known as Euronext. I also understand that the Borsa Italiana, has also a relationship with the London Stock Exchange on account of demutualization. So demutualization is really going to open up the market the more, again in line with what we know from studies, that demutualization helps to improve market quality, helps to improve market liquidity in particular, because we expect that more listings will happen. We expect that it will also attract more order flow will come in. It is not for nothing that South Africa is South Africa's market is enjoying a lot of liquidity relative to peer countries, and that's because the stock exchange there is demutualized. So we want to see more of that happen here in Nigeria following demutualization. So to me is a welcome development. The stock exchange in Nigeria will now join the league of exchanges that have demutualized.
Well, Prof, there's no doubt that this demutualization process will be a game changer for the NSE, but are there any challenges associated with the demutualization process itself?
Yes, again, going by what we know from literature, from studies, a major challenge with demutualization has to do with conflict of interest. Conflict of interest in the sense that the exchange will now be, or rather, let me put it this way, may have the incentive of sacrificing regulation on the altar of profitability. Because don't forget, now the attention of the exchange will now be on how to maximize shareholders' wealth, as it were. So the regulatory aspect may suffer. But there are studies, a recent one I saw by some scholars in a university in the US, surveyed demutualized exchanges and found that to a large extent, the regulatory oversight of the exchange, suffered as a result of the demutualization. So there'll be conflict of interest because you're not only regulating the market participants, those who constitute a source of income to you, and the order flow, you're also regulating, listed companies who also pay listing fees and also give you money. So there'll be the tendency to relax that regulation because you want their money. From time to time, the exchange will have reason to delist companies. Okay, that incentive may no longer be there when you know that if you delist a company, you no longer get listing fees. So that conflict of interest will also always be there. And for markets where you also have competitors listed on the exchange, competition coming from alternative trading platforms, electronic communication networks, for example, that can also constitute a conflict of interest. So the conflict of interest is a major challenge I see with demutualization. But the stock exchange, Nigerian Stock Exchange, is trying to get around that by spinning off into separate entities, just as you mentioned. The stock exchange now has a group, okay, within which you have some other subsidiaries. One of the subsidiaries there, which is supposed to be independent, is the Exchange Regulatory Company. So the REC company is there that will perform the function of regulation, different from the operational arm, which is the exchange itself. So that is one way to have safeguard with respect to conflict of interest. I think you mentioned the role of regulators. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the apex regulator, has a crucial role to play. Of course, the SEC has been there from day one, issuing approvals. I'm also aware that sometime in 2015, the SEC, issued guidelines, particularly with respect to corporate governance, because as you know, the governance structure of the exchange will now change. It's important that the SEC, enforces the code of corporate governance. I'm aware that, there are issues around, for example, board composition. And that board composition must include now independent directors. And because that's also one way of checking the issue of conflict of interest. I'm aware that in some other jurisdictions, for example, the independent directors, or what you may call public interest directors, are even appointed by the Securities Commission. In India, for example, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, has a hand in who gets in there as a public interest director. These public interest directors are usually appointed from, sometimes even the members of the academia, to be on the board of the, board of the exchange. In Malaysia too, it is the same thing. So it is I expect the Securities and Exchange Commission to look into the issue of governance now that the exchange structure is changing, to be sure that corporate governance standard is not lowered. And in some cases too, the Securities Commission usually demand, regulatory audits, annual regulatory audits, from the exchange, just to be sure that regulatory oversight does not suffer.
Just need you to hold your thoughts there, and we'll continue this conversation when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on the program. Professor Uchewa Leke, a professor of capital markets and the president of Capital Markets Academics of Nigeria, is still with us on the show. Now, Prof, just before we went on that break, you mentioned corporate governance. Now, we know that the NSE appointed new chief executives to head the operating and non-operating companies when this demutualization process exercise is completed. What do you make of those appointments, and what does that tell you about the corporate organization structure?
Of course, I would say what the exchange has done so far would amount to putting round pegs in round holes. Those are very qualified people. Talking about Oscar, for example, the elevation to becoming the CEO of the group will add a lot of value to the exchange. And of course, just as they said, all of that is subject to the SEC's approval. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Securities and Exchange Commission will give its approval. But beyond the management, there is also the issue of the board. The guidelines that the SEC issued, the one I saw, the one that was done in 2015, talked about the demutualized company having a board of a sufficient size, adequate size, sufficient size, but did not mention the exact number of the board. But what is important is that it's also talked about having in place there must be independent directors. Of course, those independent directors will have to be approved. The directors will have to be approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission, because it's important that in the new structure that is coming up, that the interest of all the stakeholders, are protected. Before now, of course, the major stakeholder are the mutual members, broker dealers. Okay, so every decision, consensus based, if you like, goes to serve that stakeholder. But this time around, the stakeholders have expanded. Not only the broker dealers, you also have even the regulators, the government. You have investors. You have issuers, listed companies. So the stakeholder base is now broader, and that is why it's important that the composition of the board should also reflect that broader base, such that the interests of all the stakeholders, get protected. So as I said earlier on, it's a welcome development, and I would want a situation where the NSE also has the plan, to go the entire hog of having a plan to also list, because that's the only time they can reap the full benefits of demutualization, rather than stopping at this stage. Because as I said, some exchanges turn private, and once they feel they can raise whatever money they can, they don't have the incentive to list. The Australian stock exchange, holds that record.
I'll just have to hold
in 1998, and the following day, it became listed.
Yeah, Prof, I'm speaking about listing, the plans of the NSE to list. I was going to ask, apart from listing, what else do you think the NSE should be doing going forward in order to maximize the opportunities that this demutualization process will present?
Yes, it's to follow the entire process. As I said, once the entire process is concluded, it's a door opener. It opens the doors, for alliances, and as I said, more investors showing interest in the Nigeria's capital market. So it holds a lot of opportunities, because don't forget, as a mutual member owned, some see it as a private club. Okay, but once you demutualize and then you list, you become open. You become your transparency level, and accountability level, of course, increase, and that is what will increase the confidence of investors. The flip side of that, why you find some exchanges hesitating to list, is the fact that sometimes it could also open up the exchange to hostile takeover. But that can also be taken care of when there are limits to the number of shares or proportion of shares that an investor can take. I also looked at the guidelines that the SEC, brought out the other time with respect to ownership, which when it says that not more than 5% of the shares of the exchange, will be held by, an investor. And if there are strategic investors, those strategic investors will not have more than 30%, of the equity shares of the exchange. So there are regulations or there are rules that will also prevent that from happening. So I think the idea of demutualization and going in the entire length of it, will be a good one. But of course, the starting point is what they're trying to do now, ensure that the company becomes, converted to one owned by shareholders, and then the next stage, as I said, would be that of listing on the exchange. We have even right now as we speak. If you look at the smaller market, the National Association of Securities Dealers (PLC), the OTC, NAST OTC. One of the securities admitted on NAST is also the NAST. Is also admitted on its exchange, together with even the post-trade infrastructure, the clearing infrastructure that it has, that uses the Central Securities Clearing System, which is also admitted as listed on the NAST. So what I'm saying is that the exchange can also get to a point where it becomes listed, on the exchange, particularly now that there is a regulatory independent arm that will do the self regulation and, if you like, mitigate the risks associated with conflict of interest.
Well, Prof, in 1 minute, just before I let you go, I mean, we hope that the NSE would follow through with this process. But what should investors in the Nigerian capital market expect? What should we be, looking out for when this demutualization process is completed?
Yes, from studies, what we know from studies, although as mixed results, there are studies that will tell you demutualization will increase transaction costs, the market, because the exchange will now be after profits, especially when the regulatory arm is treated as a profit center. But there are also studies that say, yes, it will improve market quality, it will improve market liquidity. So, and of course, if liquidity is improved in the market, it's to the benefit of, that means to the benefit of investors. And by and large, too, what it also means is that the exchange will be in a position, or is now in a position, to roll out new products. Okay, for some time now, there has been this talk about introducing derivatives, financial derivatives in the equities market, particularly index options or index futures, in our market. So now will be the time to, speed that up following demutualization, because we already have it in the South Africa's, equities market. So we expect to see new products, and of course, when you have new products, investors will have the choice of investing opportunities, and that will be positive for investing. That will be positive for the capital market in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for your input on the program. We really do hope that the NSE follows through with this process till the end. Thank you for giving your insight on the show tonight.
My pleasure, Edidion. Thanks very much.
Professor Uche is the president of Capital Markets Academics of Nigeria. Well, that's it on Capital Market tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Edidion.